everyone. This is Tatiana with CAF. Welcome to the third episode of All Access Art. Today's episode is about managing your collection, which can be actually really exciting. I know it's not the most exciting title in the world, but it can be a very exciting thing to do. And we wanted to talk about this next because we talked a little bit about pricing last time. And we wanted to segue that directly into how you manage your collection, because we did talk about that a little bit on the last show as well. So today I have two fantastic guests on to chat with me. So we have Jeff Wedding, who's a lifelong Star Wars collector and comic reader. His first original comic art purchase was 25 years ago, a Star Wars interior page from inker Bob McLeod. Jeff is an archaeologist and document archive manager, which has influenced his approach to organizing and storing his art. Welcome, Jeff.
Hello, good to be here.
And then we also have Mikhail Lotia, who's been substituting a midlife crisis with comic art collecting for the past 7 years. Just the right combination of OCD and laziness compels him to fastidiously catalog and organize his collection. When he's not collecting comic art, Mikhail enjoys reading and spending time with his dogs. So, Mikhail, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I think your use of the word exciting in relation to organizing your collection is just dead on.
Yeah, it's one of those things, I want people to know that, yes, we're talking about things like cataloging and alphabetizing and things, but when it's your collection and it's something that you're passionate about and you get to enjoy what you're looking through as you're doing it, it is exciting. And I'll tell you, there is nothing more exciting than looking for a piece of art and knowing where it is immediately and not having to dig, right? We all know those collectors whose things just all kind of go in a pile together. And it's nice to know where something is right away. And so I have two pro collectors here who are very good at ensuring they can find the art that they want right away. So we're just going to talk through a few different areas about our collections. Obviously, I'm going to talk a little bit too about mine, although I feel like you two are probably going to have way better advice than I do on this one. So the first area that we want to talk about is tracking your collection. So why don't you two just jump right in and tell us about how you track your art collections?
Mine's pretty basic because when I really started focusing on trying to keep track of everything that I've got, I found the tools that are built into CAF with my gallery to be pretty handy. So we've got all the fields already in there on what the purchase price was. You can go in and update what the estimated value you think it is, the provenance, where you got the piece. I also continue to leave pieces that I have either traded or sold or given as gifts. I just turn them off so they're not viewable. But then I track who I gave them to or who I sent them to, what I sold them for. So all that data gets captured. And then periodically, a couple times a year, I'll export that to a spreadsheet so I can manipulate it further in Excel if I really want to for any reason. And then I use Word just because the Office suite is inherent in most of the systems that I use these days. So when I'm doing sort of my want lists, my tracking lists, and that sort of stuff, since they're more dynamic, and I don't tend to track them in a spreadsheet, I tend to put them just on a Word doc. So if I spot a Star Wars page sitting with a dealer site, I can put the info and the link in the queue for a potential purchase and track things that way. But I've found that the tools that have already been built into the CAF galleries are pretty handy and fulfill most of my needs.
I like that you're talking about not just what you own, but what you want. When we did episode 2, Pricing Like a Pro, we talked about having spreadsheets and tracking pricing of sold. So I have a whole spreadsheet and a whole catalog of things I track that I don't own. I just want to see, what things sold for and when. And the dog's also very excited about artwork collecting, which is always great. More dogs need to collect art. And I also love that you talked about tracking on calf, because and we'll, I'll edit in a separate video. We're going to do a little bit of that right after this segment, and showing that I also use that. If you use calf, and you should be if you're not, but if you're not, be sure to watch the How to Calf episode of Collector's Cash. And then when you're adding things onto calf, after that top section where you put in the artwork and the artist and all of that stuff, you scroll down, and there's another whole section below that that Jeff mentioned, where you can put in information for yourself. This is the date I bought it. This is what I paid for it. When I buy things on like an auction site, I literally, there's a huge text box on the bottom of that section. I literally copy and paste the description that they have on the auction site, and then I put a link to where the auction was, and so I have that information for myself as well. I'd rather personally keep more information than I need than wish I had information about something and not have it later. And a good example, and I'll show this in the video when I put it in there. Last fall, I bought several pieces from some of the Disney cell animation type cells and drawings. And a lot of those were directly from the artist collections. And so that gives great provenance. I want to make sure I have that there, that this is coming directly from the Disney animator, and I'm just the second owner. And so I have that as provenance, because otherwise I don't have it in an email. There's no slip or anything that came with it. So tracking that can be really vital. So I am adding a new piece of art here. I already put all of the information in on the top. It was a fantastic dupe sketch card that Dan Dos Santos did for me at OA Expo this year. So I have everything filled in on the top, and a lot of people stop here. They click active and then they stop. But if you go down to this private data section, this is where you're really going to get a lot of value in order to track your collection. Everything in this section is private, just for you to see. You can pull reports from this. This isn't even something that CAF can go in and look at. So this is a fantastic place for you to track detailed information about pieces that you own that you don't necessarily want on the top part that's public. So you can put the purchase price in here. I paid $0 for this because it was a gift. Then you can put in the date. So I can go ahead and put in the dates in from OAX this year, and whichever day you want to put in. I can put an estimated value. It's clearly worth a bazillions of dollars. Provenance section's great because you can put in here where you bought it. Did you buy it from an auction? When did that auction end? That type of stuff. So given as gift at OAX 25 from artist. And then personal notes, you can put any other things you want here. When I buy things in auctions, I like to put the auction description and the link there in the personal notes, but that's just my preference on what I like to do. Maybe on here, because it's a sketch card, I could put what kind of card it's on or any other type of information. But this section is for you to use as you would like, and is just a phenomenal way to keep everything organized and keep tabs on the value of your collection without having to worry about losing that data or forgetting where it is.
Yeah, and for folks that haven't used it, that section that you fill in is only visible to you. So information that you're putting in there in terms of prices or contact info for someone that you might have bought a piece from or whatever, that is behind the scenes. So it's not displayed when someone from the public is viewing your gallery. So that's protected, and that's just for your own info.
And importantly, that's not even available for CAF. I talked to Bill about it, and CAF can't even go in and pull that data. So that really is your own private space. Yeah. So thanks for sharing that, because that's important. I think some people don't put stuff there because they're afraid that information is going to get out, but that is just for you.
Right, and that kind of relates to how I do it. I didn't wear my tinfoil hat today to look presentable for the show, but when I was starting out, I didn't quite know how to use how secure was it going to be? And I wasn't comfortable depending on a third party to track all of this sensitive data. So I started out just with my own spreadsheet. And I think they're both are perfectly fine options. The nice thing about doing it on CAF in retrospect is that when you're posting your piece, you're also tracking everything. And so everything happens in the same flow. But for me, what ended up happening is that because I'm using the Windows version of Excel numbers, then it's available on my phone instantly as well. So it auto updates across all platforms. And I achieved the same effect as if I, like Jeff, periodically exported that spreadsheet out and had it just as a backup. But you were mentioning in your second show about spreadsheets, and that's a vital part of my collection process. And I don't know that I'd go to exciting, but it definitely becomes ritualistic. That when a piece comes in, there are certain steps that need to be taken before anything can be done with that piece. So that I have tracking of, as you said, the chain of ownership, if necessary, and the provenance, which I think going forward is going to be increasingly important. And even just being an established member of CAF with a premium gallery who participates in the shows and is seen at the convention will be worth something versus somebody who comes out of nowhere with a piece. And then if there's a dispute about that piece, I'm going to heavily favor the person who's been open on CAF with a trail behind them versus somebody who's new, and they both claim to have the same piece. So I think there's definitely going to be a growing importance in that field.
And that's an ongoing theme that we seem to talk about every time we talk about art, which is the community piece and relationships with other people and reputation. And that all really matters a lot in this world. Compared to a lot of other hobbies, art collecting, comic art collecting is really small. I don't know every other collector out there, but the pool is a lot smaller than a lot of other hobbies. And so that does absolutely matter. You're so right.
And we're
So
relatively
Mikhail, tell us a little
young.
bit. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Jeff.
Yeah, we're relatively young as a collector group in terms of, fine art, which has been around for centuries. Comic books and comic art are pretty youthful in our development. And I think we're just now hitting a stage that comic books have already achieved, where there are some known prominent collectors who have now dispersed their collections. And so there is some extra importance or significance to owning a piece that might have been in a very prominent collection at some point. And so
yeah,
I know
that's a great point to bring up, timing wise. Comic art collecting has really only been around for about 50 years, even though, so just short history lesson for people who don't know, comics have been around for, about 100 years as far as like mainstream stuff, right? That's when things started. But when the first 50 years or so of mainstream comic books, artists didn't keep their art. It all went back to the studio. If you see some older pages, you'll see things are, corners are cut. I mean, they just cut all of this stuff. And then a lot of things were destroyed because it was not part of the process for the artist to get the art back. That's why we call it production art. It is used for in the production of a comic book, and then it was often destroyed. And then the very legendary Neil Adams fought to change that. And he single-handedly created our entire hobby by changing that system and allowing artists to get the art back, which has allowed artists to have an entirely new revenue stream as well, which, at this point is very necessary for artists to be able to support themselves. So yeah, 50 years of a hobby is not a whole lot, but we are starting to see people, age out. People are unfortunately passing away, or they're just getting out of collecting, right? They just want to sell their whole collection off. And we have seen some really big ones hit some auction blocks, and yeah, tracking that provenance is really important.
And I think the opening of the Lucas Museum is going to be a watershed moment in terms of people becoming interested, tracking this, wanting to know more about it.
So, Mikhail, I wanted to ask you, you talked about your spreadsheet. So what information do you keep on your spreadsheet for your collection?
I try to keep all the relevant information that I need. Mm-hmm. So I have the name of the piece, the date it was purchased, which actually can change. I'll get to that in a second. The marketplace from which I got the piece. So it could be Instagram, it could be one of the reps, it could be at a convention. I have the name of the artist or artists that worked on the piece, the price I paid, and then I have another column which is actually related to future planning, that in the event something should happen to me, I have the price that I feel it's worth today, if it's been a significant amount of time since I acquired the piece. Then I have a column for dates sold, if that's applicable. And then I have a history panel, which tracks the provenance of the piece. Am I the first owner? Am I the second owner? If I'm the third or fourth owner, and if I have the information, who owned the piece before me? Then I have a tab, column for location, which we'll also explore. And then over time, I've added columns for year that the art was produced, size I've been keeping track of. I also will copy paste my CAF description into the spreadsheet if the piece is posted to CAF. And I used to have photographs, but I recently deleted that because the file was getting too large and I wanted it to be a bit more manageable. So those are some of the main aspects of the art that I track. And I ended up doing a slightly odd thing with the purchase date, because the date I purchased it in the spreadsheet is the date that I get it in hand. And often there can be quite a time period between paying for the art and receiving the art, if it's a commission or if it's something complicated. So for whatever reason, I have another notes or Microsoft Word, similar kind of situation, in which when I buy a piece of art, it goes into an art due note. And that has who did I buy it from, what did I pay, how did I pay it, and what was the date. And so, for example, if there's a commission that I signed up for, it goes into the art due note. And the day that the commission arrives on my doorstep, it goes into the spreadsheet with that date, the day I received it. But then I have a history tab. If it's pertinent, I'll put some of that information, the background into it, that, took 5 years to get this piece of art for the commission, or this was a 3-way trade between X, Y, and Z. So somebody got the art and then sent it on to me, something like that. But that's the general over time. That's what it's evolved into. And, that's what I find really reasonable. And for the most part, answers all of my questions quite quickly.
I love that you keep a separate spreadsheet for what's due to you, what you haven't gotten yet. And some people might think, why would you need that? You'd be surprised that sometimes you have a lot of pieces that are floating out there, meaning, sometimes it'll be, I paid for a piece of art and I'm waiting it to ship to me, but a lot of times it will be commissions. So commissions are something you could have multiple set up, and then you're, waiting on the creation process. So that takes time. And I can tell you from personal experience, it can be very important to track that stuff, because you'd think you wouldn't forget. But you can forget when something is due to you. So knowing what is coming is important. Plus you have, if things are taking longer than they're supposed to, you have the dates and things to remind you. And then I'm sure you have a lot of the information there. So once it arrives, you can just copy and paste it over to your final spreadsheet.
And the one piece that I found I wasn't using initially, but should have been, is how did I pay? So, because sometimes you need to go back and just track something or remind someone. I've had people that I know I paid say, "Oh, can you remind me when you sent the payment," or whatnot. So generally, there's always a third avenue you could pursue. If you use Gmail, for example, it saves everything. So you would do a search through your emails, and then you're able to backtrack everything. But it's nice to just have it in the spreadsheet.
Absolutely. No, that's a good one. I didn't think about either. So I think this is a really good segue. You talked about, when things show up in the mail. So once things show up in the mail, how do you store that collection? So what do you take into consideration into deciding how to store your collection? So Jeff, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can jump in here, and I got a couple little videos we can show as I talk about it. So I sort of use a two-stage system, and it's kind of like the way Mikhail does his spreadsheets. There's sort of the active incoming, and then there's it's arrived, and now it's moving into storage. I generally don't frame and display most of my art, partly because my wife isn't interested in it. So the few pieces I do have, I have in a spare bedroom. And I'm an interior page focused collector. So flipping through a portfolio, looking at interior pages is sort of the same effect as flipping through the comic books that they were in originally. And so that's how I prefer to do it. So in the first clip here, I use Hollinger metal edge boxes. They're archival. They have an acid-free buffer. Notice the bright white interior when the box is open. And they're called metal edge because they have that little metal reinforcing tab on the corners just to help keep the boxes together. When art comes in, when I make a purchase, kind of like Mikhail, but using my gallery, I'll download, like you do, the info from either the dealer page or from the auction house and the preview image, and I'll go ahead and stage the piece with the intention of updating the scan of it later. And so when they come in, I throw them in these boxes. I know they're going to be safe. Stuff's not going to get spilled on them. Sometimes I'll just leave them in whatever plastic sleeve the dealer sends. Sometimes I'll go ahead and throw them in a Mylar because all of my pages end up in Mylar sleeves. Sometimes the art's just loose, and I'll throw it in, but I know it's going to be protected inside the box. As you mentioned in the intro, I'm an archivist in part by trade. So I kind of go to that nth degree for archival preservation. So all the materials I use are inert to the best of our ability based on what's on the market. And then all of the pages that I have, I do use Mylar sleeves on, even if they're going in a portfolio. So that takes us to the next step, where I use a similar box, but it's larger to fit the 13 by 19 portfolios. I label the outside of my boxes. I think we'll end up talking about this here in a little bit, but I sort my art generally, whether it's Star Wars or not Star Wars, and then there's sub-levels from there. So I label the outside of each box, and then I label the front of each portfolio with a label maker as to what art is in the box and in the portfolio. And then, with the little flip here going through the portfolio, everything is just sleeved and put in the order that I decide. I do use the Itoya ring binders because you can open the rings up and remove or switch out pages. And since I try to put everything in order by issue, by page number, sometimes if I pick up a new page, it needs to go in the middle of anything. And using the ring binder allows me to pull pages in and out without having to pull all of the art out of a portfolio in order to do a resort on it. So
that's my least favorite part.
Convenient. Yeah.
When you need to put something and you have one of the regular portfolios and it literally needs to go on the middle page, and you have to take everything out and move it over one sleeve.
Yeah. And, sometimes the rings can get bent or be a little hinky, but I found that my frustration with that aspect is far less than having to pull everything, because my OCD really wants to put a page in the middle somewhere.
Plus, with the Itoya ring binders, you have the the polyglass, I believe is what they call it, the sleeves.
Yep.
And the clarity on that is superior.
It's far
to
superior
what
than
you get
standard. Yep.
So yeah, ring binders for organization are definitely thumbs up. I toyed with the idea of doing page numbers in the binders for the spreadsheet to get even quicker access, but that's a fool's errand. Nobody wants to do that.
I
I'm
imagine
sure you'd
that
have to
would
update it every time.
Exactly.
Right.
Every move you're complicating it every time you add something.
So my one comment that I will make is that I have a lot of 11 by 17 standard size interior pages. But Dark Horse boards and some of the other independent comics do larger than 11 by 17 pages. So I found that 13 by 19 handles most of my stuff. And when I started putting all this together 4 years ago into my current system, I was using 11 by 17 sleeves for the 11 by 17 art and then 13 by 19 sleeves for the bigger art. The 11 by 17 sleeves and a 13 by 19 Itoya page can shift a bit. And so now I just buy 13 by 19 for all of them. I know it's a little extra sleeve for the 11 by 17 pages, but just the inner surface tension between the page and the sleeve, it's not sliding in the sleeve, but that prevents it from sliding around in the portfolio. And it means I can just order one size sleeve all the time and not have to order two different sizes.
And it's also worth noting that the Itoya ring binder sleeves have a little bit of extra give to them. So you can actually get 11 and a quarter in, and that has actually been very useful.
Yeah.
There were a lot of pieces that didn't fit an exact 11 by 17, but just needed a slight margin more. And I find that the polyglass sheets give me that, so I can get more pages into the 11 by 17. But I still use two sizes of binders, 11 by 17 and 13 by 19 for most. That's the bulk of the collection.
So speaking of, tell us about how you do your storage overall, Mikhail.
So I am mostly in portfolios. When I started out, I used to frame everything, but quickly ran out of wall space and accommodations from the rest of the family. I think that's fair. I actually get to display a fair amount of my art. But like Jeff, I have a lot of interior pages, and I think a portfolio really makes good use of being able to flip through something like that. So by now, I've transitioned over completely to the Itoya ring binders from any fixed page scenario, just because it is so much more convenient and flexible. And then over time, you're going to end up needing at least one 18 by 24 portfolio. And I've over time acquired a couple of 17 by 19s as well, which you don't really need that size. You could just go straight to 18 by 24, but, or I think is it 17 by 22 maybe?
I think it's 17 by 22. Yeah, I think that's right.
But if you end up, like Adam Hughes works so big, you need a big portfolio for his pages. But that's the bulk of it that doesn't get framed. And again, label maker, that's a great accessory in the hobby as well. The spine of each portfolio gets a designation. And it's basically, so 11 for 11 by 17, and then A, B, C, D, E, F, G as I work through them. Same with the 13 by 19. And within the portfolios, then the subcategories that seem to have worked out is cover, commission / illustration, and interior page are the three categories that I find I'm able to fill up the portfolio. And so that, when I was mentioning location on my spreadsheet, it's the label of that particular portfolio. So, this page is in 11E, for example. And that particular portfolio is all my Sandman art. So because I have one focus of my collecting with Sandman art, that gets its own portfolio. The covers and interiors are not mixed up into the rest of the collection. And I also have a few complete issues. So obviously those get their own portfolio as well. It doesn't make sense to mix them up with other pieces.
And do you have a kind of a temporary zone like Jeff does when things first come in?
So that's where the ritual aspect of it comes in, because the piece comes in, and then for my own organization, there's rules that need to be followed. So the piece gets opened, inspected, appreciated. I have these mini easels, and I'll often put the piece on that for at least a couple of days just to keep coming back to it and looking at it and being able to, it's nice to pick up the art and move it around and check it out under a different light and appreciate the workmanship that went into it. And then before it can be just put anywhere, whether sometimes it's going to go straight into a frame. Sometimes it goes, it's meant for a portfolio. So then before I can put it away, I have to update the spreadsheet. So I go into the spreadsheet, date received, all the information, the size, and then it goes into the appropriate portfolio and I update it in the spreadsheet. So that's the kind of ritual that needs to be followed. If you put it away, I found, before you do any of that, it's so easy to forget about logging that information.
So I'm going to backtrack for just a second here, because that's a really great point you brought up. When I've told people before about tracking their collection or using CAF or any of those things, and I'm talking to people who've collected for longer than I have, and I've been collecting for almost 25 years. The response I often get was, well, I have so many things and I haven't tracked anything, so then I just don't do it. So what would you say to people who are in that boat? They need to start tracking their collection, but they feel overwhelmed. What should they do?
Do one piece a day. It's like any household task that seems overwhelming. I've got boxes in the garage right now full of junk from our move that needs to be sorted. And nobody wants to do it, but I tell myself, take one piece out of that box every day and do something with it. It's the same thing with your art. And that's the beauty of the spreadsheet, is it's not fixed, right? So if you want to move something up or down or insert something ahead of something else, you very easily can. So you don't have to even be confined by starting at the beginning. Take your favorite piece and log it. Go through your email, figure out when did I buy it? When did I receive it? If you do a piece a day and if you have 1,000 pieces, you'll still be done in 3 years. And you might find that some days you do 2, some days you do 5 or 10. It doesn't take that long once you get into the habit of it. So I'd encourage people to do that.
Yeah, I think once you start it, right, once you get over that hump, then it's a lot easier to do more of them at a time. What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, and coming from my archive background, I've got an archive that has 70,000 paper documents in it. And at one point, 15 years ago, we decided it was time to do the digital backup. You're faced with tens of thousands of scans. Where do you start? You just start with the first one. So my thing is, and the first ones for us were the incoming documents. So start with what's coming in new, and then you worry about the backlog once you get your rhythm and your system going. So I'd say anyone who is facing that, start with your new incoming pieces. Start there. It's easy. It's in front of you. You don't have to dig it back out. You don't have to create piles or anything. So start with those new incoming pieces. Then you can figure out your system. You can figure out which columns you're filling in, what info you want to track. And then, as Mikhail said, just one piece at a time, just start going through that back inventory. And that puts it in bite-sized pieces that you can handle, and then it's not overwhelming.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're looking at
still active, you may be selling trading anyway. Yeah. So it may be that you reach a point where you're focused on the stuff that is your permanent collection versus things that you're thinking, well, these, may have a limited time with me. Those become the last things that you start to focus on.
Yeah, and that makes sense too, because if they're, the things you're going to keep, they're things you love, put that time and effort in. That starting with the next piece of art you get is the advice I always give people. People who don't have a calf gallery, and to me, I think that's the easiest place to start. If you want to start a spreadsheet later, but maybe you're overwhelmed, at least start with calf, because the thing with calf is, one of the things I love about calf too is that I can just go in and click a year, and it'll show me everything that I added to calf in that year. And so it kind of gives me, a history. And so, yeah, and then maybe you find out later there are additional things you want to track, that aren't on calf, and you want to start a spreadsheet. And then that's great too. But, or you just want to start a spreadsheet and you just want to start with, here's the art, here's where I bought it, here's what I paid, and then maybe you add more later. But it doesn't have to be this daunting, overwhelming task. It's supposed to be something that it's for you as the collector, right? It's for you. So what information do you care about? And, unlike documents, when you are having to go through and scan and organize and store your artwork, you get to look at it all while you're doing it. And you bought that art for a reason in the first place, right? So it should be an enjoyable process. It shouldn't feel daunting. But yeah, anything you have to do, Mikhail, you mentioned like having 1,000 pieces. That's daunting to anybody if you think of it all in one. And so I like the idea of making it, bite size. Do one a day, or say I'm going to do 5 this week. Whenever it is you break that up. A lot of people know, but not everybody knows my background. What I have my bachelor's and master's in. I'm a dietitian, and so I'm very familiar with the discussion of just do a little bit at a time, and just take the first step. Right? It's a lot of that. It's any kind of big task, no matter what it is always made easier by breaking it up into small pieces. And once you have your collection down and it's on paper or it's on the site and you can go in and look at it, I promise you, like, no matter where you are in the spectrum of what information you want to track, you're going to be so glad you did it, because it is just so helpful. And it's nice to just be able to see your collection kind of in a snapshot, instead of, completely forgetting you own pieces. I know people do that all the time. They're digging through their closet and they find a piece of art, and there's something that's completely relatable, but also completely terrifying, about that scenario. So, it's good to know what you have at all times. The only other thing I wanted to add to the storage piece, because I do collect a lot of paintings, illustration, and like as a magic art collector, an illustration collector, it is not uncommon for me to buy pieces and have them come in the mail and they're already in a frame. So like the Arcades piece, the Steve Belladin piece that's right behind me here, you can see a little bit of it. I bought that from, I did a trade with another collector. And so I sent my piece to him framed, and then he sent this piece to me framed. Luckily, I was just able to just put it up here, but that's not always the case. So when you have paintings, you have to be really... And paintings for anything, right? There's painted comic book art and stuff too, but you have to be really aware of what the medium is. I personally track the medium on all of my pieces too, but that's just because for me it matters more because I collect such a variety of mediums. But if you have, especially something like an oil painting, oils need to breathe. You don't want to just take an oil painting and put it in a portfolio. The portfolios aren't designed for that. If you have a watercolor or an acrylic, those should be fine. Generally speaking, they should be fine. With oil paintings, I highly recommend putting glassine on it. Glassine is, if you've never seen it before, it kind of feels like parchment paper or wax paper. It's that kind of a style. It's a coated paper that's designed to protect the face of the painting. So I always recommend putting that over the face of the painting. And then if you have framed ones, or even if they're unframed, if they're on like a thick board, you can store them with the glassine on them. And then if you're standing them up and you want to separate them, I recommend really nice big pieces of cardboard to keep them separated. And you want to make sure they're all standing up nice and straight. If they ship in a really nice box, like a master pack box that's designed for shipping framed pieces, you can just leave them in there too. But those take up a lot of space, so sometimes people take them out. But you really want to be careful with paintings, because I have seen people open their closet and there's literally a stack of paintings, not framed, just a stack of paintings, just all touching each other, just all standing up in the closet. And then of course there's also the risk of like water damage and all these other things. And I've seen, the other thing about art is it's not just about the money, right? These are one of one. And Jeff, I'm sure as somebody who does this professionally, you've seen every stain, every coffee, every pizza, every water, right? And things can always happen, but you want to always do the best that you can to minimize that risk. So paintings are just a little bit different in that way, but you just have to be thoughtful of that. I also talked to the CAF team about what everybody uses. Bill and Kazra both use the Husky mobile workbench. So it's cool. It's kind of like one of the things I'm planning to get when I'm in between houses right now. So I'm in Portfolioville right now, which I don't mind, but I want to get one of the really nice big architect drawer sets. And the thing about those that's great is you can fit a lot in them and they're very sturdy. The bad thing is that they're really heavy and you can't move them. The Husky mobile workbenches are really nice because essentially it's like it's a toolbox on wheels with like the top almost looks like a cutting board. And then the drawers, you can get sizes where the drawers are perfect for fitting artwork in, and then it rolls. Matt Sardo uses the IKEA drawer unit on casters, which is really nice too. It's a more portable, that doesn't hold as much. It has a max weight capacity of 40 pounds, but Matt's a newer collector, although I'm sure he's going to max that out before the end of the year. And then Matt DiTullio uses it looks like a tall bookshelf, but it also is on rollers so that he can move things around. And there's tons of other options too. I just wanted to share some of the things that the team uses. And I just want to say, we're not sponsored by or affiliated with any of these storage solutions whatsoever. We just wanted to, it's helpful for people to have actual names of products that we use. But we are not in any way affiliated with or sponsored by them. So, you just have to find what works for you, but that's, a lot of different options that people have used.
And it can be difficult. At the moment, having just moved, I'm struggling with where to put my portfolios. Because they're wide, they're long, and they're heavy. Mm-hmm. That 40 pounds is not going to cut it for very long for Matt Sardo. I'm going to tell him that.
Paper's heavier than people think it is, right? Like it adds up real fast.
So you need a deep shelf. And then you also want to be cognizant, like you were saying, of the medium inside. Is it compressing this way or is it compressing this way? What's that going to do to the contents inside? So definitely worth contemplating.
Yeah, the Itoya portfolios, the ring binders that you're both talking about, I have some of those as well. The thing that's nice about those is the outsides are really nice and thick. So imagine, just a regular small binder that you put paper in, the ones where like the outside is sturdy. So those versus a lot of the other Itoya portfolios, like the ones we take to shows where the outside's more bendable. So they each have their pluses and minuses, but the ring binders are much easier to stand up because they're a lot sturdier in that way. You still want to be careful. Things can pull, so you want to look. But I've seen people store their regular Itoya portfolio standing up, and you really have to be careful about that because those are not, the outsides aren't very rigid, and you can end up with all your pages kind of bent. So you really have to look at that. My last house my office had built-ins. And so I was just able, to stack things. If I had my portfolios, I could stack them. Everything was really, really easy. But yeah, whenever you move, you're in a completely new space now on the East Coast. And it takes a while to figure out where everything is going to go and how you're going to fit it all in.
Taking a step back, I did forget to mention that one of the other steps before the art gets put away is scanning it or photographing it. And now your phone app or your Photos app has a lot of options for tagging artwork. It's hard to keep up with all of that, and I wish I had, though. It would be nice when you have done it, you can pull up your phone and just type in an artist's name, and all of the art, everything you've tagged with that artist's name will show up. And so that's also a nice way to quickly access your art if you want to show someone a picture or something like that. Or eventually the time comes when you're going to sell a piece and you're trying to find the nice original scan that you took of it, and you have to doom scroll through a whole bunch of art to find it. There's always hacks for that. One thing I'll do is I'll check what was the date I posted it to CAF. And generally that's the date I scanned it. So then I can put that date into my phone. All the pictures from that date pop up and you can find the scan. But the Photos app, I find, is becoming more and more of an important documenting side archive of what you have.
Yeah, I really need to start using the tagging feature. I completely forget to use it all the time. And I need to use it not just for my collection, but for everything, right? I'm sure that really helps a lot.
It might be a place where the AI is handy down the road, because there's a lot of different tags you can apply. You can apply the artist's name. You can apply whether it's an interior page or a cover, what the title it's from. It could. That's why I think I fell off, is because there's too much information you could potentially put in. But the other thing I wanted to mention was that when the art comes in, one thing I do is I email the person from whom I purchased it to say, hey, I received this. And maybe they care, maybe they don't. Maybe it's, if it's a big dealer who's shipping 1,000 pieces a day or a month, or, maybe they don't care so much. But I personally, when I send a piece out, I am very tense until I know that it's been safely received and in hand. So that's something I also try to do.
Yeah, that's a great best practice. And I'll tell you, as somebody who sells art professionally, I always appreciate it when people let me know. It's also nice to get feedback that I can share with the artists and stuff too, right? I got it in hand and I absolutely love it. And, make sure to let the artist know that I really love it. And so that's always helpful. And thank you for bringing up scanning, because of course that's an incredibly important piece that we should have talked about. The other thing with your phone now, because there's the CAF app, is you can always just take a photo of your art and then just directly upload it into your gallery. So that is a nice shortcut for people as well. Scanner wise, again, I'm a professional. I do this every day since I sell artwork. But that being said, yes, I have like a larger scanner. I have like one of the 11 by 17 printer. It's just the A3 printer scanner, and then I can also stitch things together if they're larger. But the thing that is so fantastic now is that you can get one of these for $200 or $300. Not even 10 or 15 years ago, getting a really nice oversized scanner could cost thousands of dollars. And now they're much, much more affordable. So if you really want to get nice, crisp scans of your artwork, there are, pretty much all the printer companies. I have an HP right now, but I wouldn't recommend that over another company. I've had an Epson before, and it was just fine as well. So those are all good options. And then, photographing, if you photograph your art, daylight, natural light's always the best option for that. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways.
And I think sometimes people don't realize that there's some art you can't scan. Like Manix Abrera, the paints that he uses, they don't scan well at all. You need a photograph.
And even then, it doesn't always grab.
It doesn't capture the sparkle and the vibrance. And then the thing that really frustrates me on CAF is seeing a photograph with a shadow across the art. And
the arms and the phone over the artwork, yeah.
So I think it's very easy to rectify. And if you don't know to look for it, it is easy to miss. But I think as people become more invested in the hobby and take pride, I take pride in how my gallery presents itself. So, and if I see someone likewise who has obviously taken care in scanning and cropping their photographs, I will immediately follow that gallery. That's really all the bare minimum that I want from you is you love your art, you enjoy your art, and you're presenting it to the best of your ability to showcase it and to do the artist justice. So it doesn't matter to me really, what the content is. If you've taken the care to do that, it goes a long way with me.
So what's a best practice for you for photographing a piece of art? How do you recommend people set that up?
I think in my past life, I did some training with video, and so I know to look for the lighting and the shadows, etc. But like you're saying, an 11x17 scanner is relatively quite affordable, especially when we look at the prices of all this art that people are buying. I think you could, on sale, pick up an Epson Workforce for the same price as a mystery sketch. And if you have more than 25 pieces in your collection, that's probably a worthy investment to have. You take a scan or take a photograph. I find the photographing is more difficult to get it even, and so that there's no warp in perspective. But and you can play around with it. Again, going back to Mannix, he works on raw paper with a deckled edge. And I found that putting it on a black piece of paper and then photographing it gave you the best result, because you're minimizing the reflection and you're showing off the edge and you're giving yourself a square to work with, whereas sometimes his paper may not be perfectly square. Mm-hmm. But generally, a nice scan will do the trick. That's the best thing. And if you're taking a photograph, just be mindful of how you're cropping it. I remember reading back in the day, for fine art in museums, the frame always extends over the painted piece. So the way you would authenticate something is if the edges under the frame match what the archival data shows. So if someone's forging something, they don't know exactly how the corners and edges look, because that's always covered by a frame. I always found that to be an interesting little factoid about the fine art world. And not that, but here with comic art, I think you show the whole board, show the notes, if you're taking a good scan, it's great sometimes to get in there and read what the editor may have written or what the artist may have written, how the colorist interpreted something. And then don't show your carpet, crop Lance.
Or your feet.
Crop that carpet out.
Your feet.
Exactly.
We have so many photos of people's toes.
But I appreciate that, because they know that to put it on the ground and get over it is going to give you the best perspective on it versus something at an angle. Mm.
Jeff, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. Some of the stuff that I've had to do by photograph, either due to size or because it's a certain medium, like he mentioned Mannix and the way he paints. I have done it outside, so using natural lighting. In those instances, I take the time, and like Kyle's mentioned, artist easels, those are very handy to be the third hand. Sometimes it's figuring out the position where you're not between the art and the sun or whatever light source you've got, so you can mitigate those shadows. But then also, achieving that position relative to the piece where you're squaring up to the art. And, the photo apps now are getting very user-friendly and trying to adjust some of that tombstoning where you get the parallax perspectives and stuff, and it can help you auto-correct that and straighten the piece back out. But part of it is just take your time, take 2 or 3 shots, figure out which one's the best one.
And you could also reach out to the artist in a pinch too.
Yep.
I found that more and more artists are keeping a good record, and there's nothing better than having something from the person who best knows how it should be represented.
Yeah.
So if they've taken their care to do that, that's a good option.
Yeah, it never hurts to reach back to the last person and ask, do you have a high-res scan of this you could share with me, or a nice photograph? So.
Yeah, and not just high-res, but again, from my archivist background, I always do my scans as 600 DPI TIFFs. So TIFFs are not compressed like JPEGs, and they won't recompress over time as you open and close the files. So as far as digital data, that's our most stable over time. And so I hold on to those TIFFs. And then I'm not as good about tagging and labeling them as I should to make them easy to scroll back through. That is one of my housekeeping to-do list things that I'll need to go back and work on, is being able to quickly get hands on those scans within my digital files. And then one other comment, since you both mentioned moving, is that should be a consideration with your storage approach. Excuse me. Oh, got a tickle. So Mikhail has gone from relatively humid West Coast California now over to the opposite coast. I'm sitting in the middle of the arid Southwest. Tatiana, you've moved a couple of times, I believe.
Yeah, I moved from very dry Colorado to now being in the much more humid Midwest. So it's very different. Yeah.
And I think you've got a third destination on the horizon.
Yeah.
So again, especially with the oil paintings and stuff and things needing to breathe, you've got potential big swings in humidity. If I went from Las Vegas to Florida, I don't really worry about humidity here. Humidity would be a consideration. And then you start thinking about, am I over encapsulating? If I've got Mylars and portfolios here in Las Vegas, it's fine because our relative humidity is always very low. But am I over encapsulating in Florida, where humidity and mold spores and stuff would be a bigger concern? So
I have seen people keep their art, they think they're protecting it because they're putting it in plastic, and then they keep it in their basement. And then when it's opened years later, it's moldy. That happens.
Yeah. So things, not just oil paintings, but all paper needs to breathe to accommodate any changes in humidity and stuff. And so, these are sort of long-term considerations for art ownership. It's also knowledge that isn't something you inherently pick up along the way. And so one of the things that I valued most with being in the hobby than actually getting out of the hobby for 8 or 10 years and then coming back and really getting involved with comic art fans is this huge resource that is all of my fellow collectors. And all of your experiences and all of your knowledge is now at my fingertips. And so all I have to do is shoot an email or catch one of these types of shows to glean some other little nugget that I can incorporate in my approach, and always things I don't consider. So,
absolutely, yeah. It's always good to listen to other people. I've learned so much from the two of you already, just in the conversation today. And I've been collecting comic art since I was a teenager. So I have learned a lot, and I hope people will learn a lot. We have one more category to discuss, and we've talked about it a little bit already. Mikhail, since you talked about this a little bit, can you talk a little bit about how you organize your collection? So like what categorization do you choose? You talked a little bit about covers versus others.
Yeah. And I think that's basically it. Full issues are kept separately. Covers are kept separately. Interior pages. And then in 11 by 17, a commission is something that I specifically asked for and was made for me. So I've filled up a complete portfolio with that. In the 13 by 19, my commissions and illustration, which is just a piece I purchased that was not created for me, those will generally fit together. So it's fine. It's just finding that balance that works. And recently we've seen, I've actually started to enjoy 9 by 12 art quite a bit for con sketches and the mystery sketches. And one of my favorite books is 9E, which has, all my Death illustrations, my Galactus illustrations, some Star Wars stuff. It's funny, you'll have like a favorite book that you just really enjoy flipping through. And now we're also seeing sketch cards gain prominence and requiring their own storage, which is very easy. There's a lot of trading card binders out there that you can use. And just the other day, I was online looking for ready-made trading card framing solutions. And there's quite a few out there already.
I personally would highly recommend Frame-A-Jigs. That's my that's my buddy's company, and they kickstarted it, and it's really nice because it's designed to fit, the really heavy plastic. It's not like a top loader, but the really heavy plastic ones you put the art in and it snaps shut, so it protects the card, and then that just slips right in the top of the frame. And the frame is, you can see it on both sides. So it's really nice for if you collect, like for magic cards.
Something with stats on the back or something.
And so like magic cards are like artist proofs. It'll have the card on one side and the back's blank. That's where you get the artwork. And so you can look at both sides. Or if you're getting a limited edition sketch card, you can see the information on the back. And it comes in a bunch of colors. So that's just a personal recommendation because a friend of mine, I have a bunch of them. I used those to display some sketch cards at OA Expo this year. So, and I'll probably do that again next year. So obviously, people get whatever works for them, but that's a product that I really like and it's really easy to use. And also I wanted to add, all the different sizes. Portfolios come in all different sizes too. And they don't make sketch card portfolios, but they do make small, 9x12s and even smaller than that as well.
Actually, Itoya now has one that is just bigger than a trading card.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. That must be new. I haven't seen that. That sounds awesome.
But yeah, in terms of organizing my collection, that's at the moment, that's how I do it.
Excellent. Jeff, what about you? You mentioned a little bit earlier, but how do you categorize everything?
Yeah, so anyone who goes to my CAF gallery or has met me knows I'm a Star Wars guy primarily. And so that's my first sort is it Star Wars or is it not Star Wars? And my gallery setup is pretty similar to how I stage my portfolios. And so I've got one portfolio that's my sort of X-book, X-Men, X-Force, whatever pages, because I just sort of dabble in that. So they all fit in one portfolio. I've got my DC superheroes portfolio. I've got my Marvel superheroes portfolio. Again, small components of my overall collection. And then in terms of the Star Wars stuff, it's by publisher first. So original Marvel run, then Dark Horse, then second Marvel run, and then IDW and the other international publishers. And because I focus on interior pages, I group by title, by issue, and order by page number. And so for like my vintage Marvel, it's usually one representative page every few issues. But there are some books where I don't have complete issues, but I've got significant portions. And then those all get grouped together. And that's when the ring binder polyglass page Itoyas come in handy. When I get a new one that needs to get inserted to keep that kind of sequencing, then that's where it happens. And then I've got a couple of smaller Itoyas, smaller sizes for commissions and con sketches and stuff. And those I kind of just generally group Star Wars or not Star Wars. And so all the Star Wars ones go in one set, all the not Star Wars characters go in another.
The thing I like about the Itoya ring binders too is that you can buy additional pages separately. So when you buy the binder, it comes with, I think, 20 pages in there. Because the regular portfolios are standard 20, right? So it's 40 pieces of art. So I think that's how many are in there. It says on there. But you can also buy the pages separately. So, because they'll fit more than what they come with. So you can, add stuff in and see how many works for you and then move things around. My collection is, I love hearing how other people organize theirs because I organize mine completely differently than either of you two do. And I think a lot of it is just based on how we collect. So, I tend to collect, a lot of it is certain artists that I like. So my collection is, or if you go on my CAF page, my collection is physically organized the same way that it's organized on CAF. So it's alphabetical by first name, which I played around with trying to figure that out for a while. But a lot of these artists are people I know personally. And so first name made more sense for me because their first name is what comes to mind first versus their last name. So so it's alphabetized by first name. And then I also have some separate sections where like all my Magic the Gathering stuff is in one. So like on CAF, it's in one gallery. Physically, it's a little bit different because they're all very different sizes and being paintings and things. They don't just go in portfolios. But on CAF, they're that way. And then I also have like an X-Men CAF gallery for, any miscellaneous things from artists who I don't necessarily, collect or have multiple pieces from. And then if I have somebody, let's say they're in the X-Men gallery, I have one piece from them, then I end up collecting more pieces of theirs, then I'll end up breaking them out and create their own gallery. And then things will get sorted a little bit differently. I have considered changing it because it is kind of two different systems in one, but it's worked pretty well for me over the years. I have found that there is no one way that's perfect. There's always kind of some drawbacks. And then there's, pluses and minuses. So it's just, you just have to find for yourself what works best for you. So, Jeff, like you said, if you're mostly collecting Star Wars, it absolutely makes sense to have all the Star Wars stuff together. For other collectors, that might not make sense. They might want to break that out by other things, right? So I know some people have, Marvel and DC versus independent, and all the independent stuff together. So it really depends on how you collect and what works best for you. There is, no right or wrong. It's just whatever helps you find your things and know where things are, and then enjoying that flip through when you pull that portfolio out.
And it's interesting for me to hear about you two because my CAF gallery doesn't necessarily reflect how my physical collection is sorted. So it can give you an opportunity to present a sorted collection that you haven't done in real life, or because it just doesn't make sense to have a portfolio with just 6 pieces. So you need to get other stuff in there to fill it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Jeff, you were going to say something.
Yeah, this journey that we're all on as collectors is one that evolves over time. So, what your thought process is now, this is certainly not the thought process I had 5 years ago. It's certainly not the process I had 25 years ago when I had just a handful of pieces. And it was really a subset of my larger Star Wars collecting, because I was buying the action figures and everything in the beginning. Now all of that has fallen to the wayside because my focus is solely on comic art. So you hit stages where you reevaluate, you reconsider, and maybe you will end up resorting everything into a new system at some point. A lot of the conversation is, what the next purchase is and what the next piece coming in is, but then we all have those sort of waves of life and collecting where, because I'm remodeling a master bathroom, which I am at the moment, I'm not spending as much on art collecting, or I'm saving up for, the next big heritage signature auction for a piece I'm shooting for. Those are the downtimes where you're not actively seeking new stuff that you can take the time to go back and revisit. And it keeps you engaged with the hobby when otherwise you may think, I need to not think about art because I'm trying to save money. Well, just actually think about your collection and these other aspects. And so you can still maintain all your conversations with everybody and say, hey, what are you guys using for your storage? Or, what's your thoughts on grouping things this way or that way? And it gives you time to go back and reflect on what you're doing and also revisit all of your pieces. It's nice sometimes to just sit down and look at what you've got and appreciate what you already have without that sort of of adrenaline rush aspect we also enjoy from the hunt.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. I think that's a great reminder. So many of us as collectors, and I know I'm speaking for myself and so many others, you get addicted to it's the chase, right? And then once you have the piece of art in your hand, it's easy to forget because you already own it. So now it's like, oh, you're taking it for granted. And we need to stop doing that. You bought that piece of art for a reason. Whether that's, framing it and putting it on the wall, or whether that's reorganizing your collection physically, and then you get to look at everything, or just sitting down and flipping through one of your portfolios and just, reminding yourself of all the cool art you have and the stories that go with those things. That reminds me of, when I met this person at this convention, and, I met my best friend in line for Jim Lee. I don't even know how, it's been just about 20 years. We were line controlling and doing all this stuff. And we ended up, becoming fast friends, doing a bunch of shows together. And so that's a piece of art that every time I look at it, I remember that first time that we met. And, he and I talked about that not too long ago as well. So that's a great reminder that the hobby is, art collecting is so much more than just the collecting part. It's the whole thing. It's how you manage your collection. It's the relationships with other collectors. It's the stories. It's the community that we have, and not just what are you buying in the auction that ends this week, or what did you buy in, the auction that ended yesterday, and those types of discussions.
And getting back to something you both touched upon, it's a check-in with the physical status of the art. So, if you're flipping through your portfolios regularly, you're circulating them, you're getting them out of storage and the cobwebs, and you're checking, hey, was that always there? Let me check the scan. And then if required, maybe I need to take some remedial steps. I know of someone who had pieces and frames that were showing some troubling signs of aging. So he was able to proactively then check everything and isolate the problem that was humidity related, and then rectify that. So you never know. You may think something's framed and up on the wall doing great. It never hurts to just stop and check it out and really look at it and appreciate it. And maybe you'll save yourself some headaches down the road.
Yeah, framing is going to be the next conversation. That'll be the next episode. We'll talk about that very soon. But there are so many things to know there. There's so many ins and outs there. And yeah, for today's discussion, just a great point. You need to have eyes on your artwork. You can't just assume, Jeff, you talked about it needing to breathe. A reminder to people that paper is organic. It's not a rock that you can stick in the closet and come back to it 10 years later and it's still a rock. It is organic. So it can break down. It can, and things like with framed art, you might realize, oh, I thought this spot was fine in the house, but I am starting to get some fading. So looking at, is it how it's framed, or should I move it to a different location, or do I need to get different window shades or that kind of stuff. And that can help to prevent major heartache down the road. Like the story I was saying when somebody went and got a portfolio of art that they've had in their basement. And like, this is just me, but I don't think you should put art in your basement. If it's a finished basement, that's fine. But if you have like an unfinished dungeon basement and you can smell your basement, you're also going to be able to smell that in the artwork if you leave it down there. So please don't. But once you have artwork that's moldy, you have to take it to a professional restorer, and they can't guarantee they're always going to be able to get all of that out, because again, it's organic. You're trying to restore something that has to be done very delicately. And so the earlier you catch something, the better, because you can, like you said, you can rectify it. You can just move that piece of art, or you can reframe it, or, whatever you're doing with it. And then not have it be a catastrophic event.
Yeah.
I've had pieces of art in portfolios where they weren't perfectly straight, I guess, when I put them back the last time. And I open it and it's a little bit warped, but I've caught it early enough that it's just a little bit warped and I can just re-straighten it back out. Whereas if I didn't look at it for another year, it might just be, bent, and there's nothing I can do about it. So, it always helps to have eyes on it.
It's good to have a housekeeping plan. I mean, that's the term we use in the archive industry. It's just a housekeeping plan. Where you're putting eyes on each piece at minimum once a year. And if that's just a quick flip through some portfolios, that's what you need. If that's taking time to just stand and look at a frame piece and evaluate its condition, because there's 1,000 different things out there, from mold to pests to, accidental spills you didn't notice or fading in a frame, that, all it takes is just a minute or two to look at a piece to just see, is there a visual clue that there's something here that I need to address, or are we good for the next 6 months, the next year, whatever. And I think that's just good housekeeping, which is why we use the term for any collector, whether it's art or it's toys or it's something else. If it's out of sight, out of mind, you can't just assume that everything is still okay.
Yeah, we had when I was a teenager, we had an unexpected, secret, flood. It wasn't something that we even noticed. I noticed it later. It must have come out of the laundry room, and, it only just seeped into the carpet, in the closet. So none of us had stepped in any wet anywhere and didn't know. But luckily, I always pulled out my comic collection and looked through things and would reorganize stuff. And I saw that the bottom of the, this much of the bottom of the box was crinkly. You can tell if you've ever had water damage on a comic box, And luckily, everything was in bags and boards, and nothing had gotten water damage. But I took everything apart, I rebagged and boarded everything and put it in a new bag. Because if I had left it like that for a long period of time, mold could have gotten into the comic books, or even though it was sealed at the time, things might have broken down, and it might not have stayed that way. So, I prevented a catastrophe of an entire box of comics being lost to water damage. First of all, because I stored them right the first time. And then secondly, because I caught it not too long after it happened. So, any collectibles. I love that. Housekeeping, that's good to know. That's the term we will use for our collecting as well. So I wanted to thank you both so much for coming on today. This has been so incredibly insightful for me. I know it's going to be so incredibly insightful for everybody who watches this episode. And, we're definitely going to have you both on at another time. And you'll have to let me know what will work. I'm probably going to have Mikhail on for the framing discussion, because we keep talking about framing. So I'll probably have to have you on for that one. Are there any final thoughts or things that either one of you wanted to say before we wrap up for the day?
I'm inspired to go do some housekeeping and look at some art.
We have to quote that. You don't hear that very often. I'm inspired to go do some housekeeping. Love it.
Yeah, when you're looking at it as just part of your hobby, and that moment you can just decompress and relax and look at art, because while you're looking at it, you're also evaluating it, because you're going to notice if any of these things are happening. And it's just one of those times where you can enjoy the quiet moments of the hobby and appreciate what you have. So just like being able to get on one of these shows is always great to connect with fellow collectors.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for watching. Reminder that below the video, there's going to be information about some of the things we talked about today. And also, if you ever have any questions, follow-up questions from an episode, or you have topics that you would like to see covered, check out the Google form link in the section below the video. Fill that out, and maybe you can be featured in one of our future videos. Thanks so much, everyone.